This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Welcome to the podcast interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I am Steve Gould. I am old ginger face. Thank you for being here, everybody. Appreciate you. Appreciate you finding the podcast. Appreciate you binge listening to the podcast. That's always good. So thank you. Excuse my voice. It's a little bit, it's a little rough. I've had a cold for about a week. Typically how it goes in my house is kids will get sick, then my wife will get sick, and then at the very end, if at all, I will get sick. So that's kind of where I'm at. I went to work. I worked through it, but didn't get a lot of sleep. So it's kind of lingering. So sorry for the kind of stuffy voice, but I'm happy to be with you. I'm excited for this guest. He's got quite the police career, and he's also an author. He did 35 years in law enforcement between Berkeley PD, Baldwin Park, Farmington, New Mexico, and then back up into the Bay Area where he retired as a chief. 35 years in law enforcement, 4 departments, as I said, in 2 states, worked every rank in assignment from patrol officer to chief of police, worked 10 years as a vice president of corporate security for NBCUniversal in Los Angeles, also was director of security for the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, currently consults with Cook and Associates, a security investigations firm in the Bay Area, and he's authored 3 books centered in the San Francisco Bay Area, which we will talk about. Without further ado, let me bring on the great Brian Brady. Brian.
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
I'm good, sir. Good to have you.
Thank you.
I saw you when we were communicating. I first initially got your email, I saw your name and I thought it was an old childhood friend screwing with me because I grew up with a Brian Brady, same spelling.
Really?
Yep.
Where?
Cape Cod. He was from
Nope.
Eastham. No.
No. Ours were when they immigrated. My dad's from Ireland, so when they immigrated, it was straight to the Bay Area.
Okay. Are you related to Tom Brady? Last
No.
question.
Although I certainly know of him, and he was at Sarah High School, which is right down the road from us. Actually, when I was in school, I went to St. Ignatius in San Francisco, and we would have been in the same league today, but back then they were separate leagues. So, and he's a little bit younger.
So you're basically related, is what you're saying, to the great Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Well, man, it's great to have you on. Quite the police career. Started up in Berkeley. That place is pretty politically charged place to be a cop, I imagine.
It was, our theory was if you could be a police officer in Berkeley, you could be a police officer anywhere.
Yeah.
And fortunately, Berkeley was unique. A lot of the things that have happened in law enforcement over the last century either started in Berkeley, were invented in Berkeley, perfected in Berkeley. I'm going back to, Berkeley first department to ever use a lie detector. The first department that actually had an MO, modus operandi, even before the FBI. First department to use radios in patrol cars. First
Really?
department.
Wow.
Yeah. Believe it or not, Berkeley was the first department to have a police dog. They had a woman police officer and an African-American officer in the 20s, way ahead of. So a lot of the trends that happened later started in Berkeley. And we were the college cops. You have college to get on. So we were pretty proud of ourselves. We were saw ourselves as kind of the best of the best. And that carried over. I think the quality of the work was good. And you learned a lot. You learned how to investigate. So making the transition then to other departments was much easier.
Gotcha. Yeah. Wow. Talk about progressive. Of course, that progressivism now in the city of Berkeley is overwrought.
Well, they say that the joke in Berkeley was today a conservative in Berkeley is just a liberalism and a crime victim. So, the politics in Berkeley wasn't. It was probably much more conservative, really, in the 50s into the early 60s. And then with the change politically, nationally, and with the Vietnam War and all the things that transpired, Berkeley became kind of the cutting edge of the demonstrations and the anti-government. And I think that's, carried over. And once you garner the reputation, then you feed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's not that much different than the rest of California, but that state in general, the West Coast in general, it seems like has always been, because I've always been an East Coast cop. They have always been like cutting edge with technology. They even got semi-automatic pistols first. Like they got everything first. Computers in the cars.
I think I think that's true, and I think we're fortunate that we have POST, which is Peace Officer Standard and Training, which sets the rules to be a peace officer in California, and you have to play by those rules. You have to hit certain standards. To be hired, you have to go through a background investigation. They set the standard for the investigation. They set the areas that have to be checked. And if you don't check all the boxes, you can't get certified. If you promote, you have to go to a post-approved mandatory 80 hours of supervisory training within the first year. You have to go through 80 hours of mid-management training if you promote again. You have to go to command training. And it's all, part of the process. They also have a system of decommissioning officers, where if you have an officer that commits a crime or does something to get terminated, you go in a decommission file in California so you can't get hired again. And that's one of the problems they've had nationally, where you'll see an officer get fired in a department and get rehired somewhere else. Here, with that file system the state maintains, that can't happen.
Yeah, believe it or not, Massachusetts just got POST about 2 years ago.
Now, we set the standard for that, and a lot of states have it now, and it's great. And I think it's going to dramatically improve the quality of policing, and people have a standard that they aspire to, and it professionalizes the whole career.
Yeah, you're right. It was easy for bad cops to hide too. Like they're in Mass, like the coast basically has, like where I am now, I started on the coast, now I'm in Western Mass, and Western Mass is always treated as kind of the place the capital forgot. Like it gets money last. It's, it's just the way it is. It's the rural part of the state. But that's what would happen. You'd get a cop that fell on his face on the coast and then would just come out west and might even get like rank, or whatever, because, lower pay, desperate for cops, no tracking system to know this guy's discipline. And if the agency didn't care at all, they would, during a background, there's really no law that says they had to tell you anything. They could just say, yeah, he's fine, or no comment.
Yeah, in the law in California, it's worked out where the company that I consult with now, we do background investigations for police and fire personnel. And California, you can't, as an employer, when our investigators show up or the investigator from the agency shows up, you just can't say, well, so-and-so worked here from day 1 to day 12, and that's all we're going to say.
Right.
You're obligated to divulge. You have no choice.
Yeah.
So that has been, the legislature saved us on that. That's a huge thing, to be able to compel employers to give you the information you need on that person.
Yeah, I did backgrounds for City of LA for a couple of years for the PD, and I used to carry a photocopy in each of my cases folder of that law, and I would give it, if they were hesitant at all, I would say, here's the law, and just so you know, if you had information that would have kept them from becoming a peace officer and something happens, you could be liable. Immediately personnel folders would open and they would talk to you.
How long ago did you do backgrounds for LA?
2017, 2019.
Okay, because old Berkeley compadre of mine was doing backgrounds for LA probably a little before you, but yeah, he very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was great. They get a lot of freedom. You basically had, of course, they wanted a certain amount of cases, but they would, you did your field work at the office with personnel building was kind of your home base, and you had field work to do. And it was kind of the first job I ever had outside of police work that was like, had a long leash. Just produce, and we're not really going to ask too many questions about what you're doing. And that was really cool.
Yeah, the backgrounds are fascinating. You've experienced it. You look at some of these and you go, why are you applying for a police job? There's no way in hell you're ever going to get this job. You're wasting all our time. But
yeah,
you see them.
And I worked with guys that had done it for 20 years, and to them too, the changes they saw, like I would have candidates come in that like on paper looked like a good candidate, and then they would come in like cargo shorts and a t-shirt to meet me. And the background guys would say 20 years ago, he'd be gone right there. He'd be like, reapply in 3 years. But
We
When I
if
was
we
there,
tell them,
they would take them.
yeah, we send the notice for the interview. It says this is a job interview. Dress appropriately. And like you said, some of them will show up in flip flops and cargo shorts, and you go, I don't know if that's that. If you think that's appropriate for a job interview, maybe you're in the wrong line of work.
Yeah. No, what I like the my favorite candidate was a kid from, a poor part of the city. He would come in and you could tell he was wearing like his dad or his older brother's jacket and the pants weren't right. That to me was like, I like that kid because he couldn't afford it, doesn't have the right stuff, but he put a hodgepodge of a suit together and he's trying to look his best.
He tried. You're right. That's a lot of points right there for trying.
Absolutely.
Where that other guy, just didn't care.
Yeah. I would get guys that were like, had rank in the military and all this stuff. And they would come in and just like they had the job already. They had heard like we were having trouble hiring. So they were going to come in and be Joe Cool Guy. And you're like, get the hell out of here.
Yeah. And some of the ones we're getting right now, and it's fascinating, is that they're, 25, 26 years old and they still live at home. Their job history is they were a barista at Starbucks or a Uber driver. I'm not knocking Starbucks. It's a great place to start, but I don't know that it's necessarily a career. And I don't know that it's necessarily the career background to go into law enforcement.
Yeah.
But it's interesting though. I've always been interested in law enforcement. Why did you ever consider working at a job less than a police officer in the career field to get a feel for it? Oh, no, I never did that.
Yeah.
So,
Those guys used to worry me too. And I'd always be like, did you play contact sports or get in any schoolyard fights? Like, because you get worried that they have had a very soft life. And you're like, we don't want to spend all this time vetting you, then have you freak out or not be able to, or be scared or whatever.
I remember one of the questions we asked was, have you ever had to make a critical decision? And I remember this one candidate, he sat there and he thought about it for a while. And he said, I got off of my work and I was coming back to my apartment and it was wintertime and the area we lived in was prone to flooding and the road was flooded and the signs were up that we couldn't go any further and the police were turning us around. So I had to decide whether I should turn around or go on. Would that be a critical decision? No, you idiot. If the road was flooded, the decision was made for you. You turn around. But
that's awesome.
For him, that was a critical decision.
That's brutal. Brian, can you take us way back to when you were a young patrolman hitting the streets? Can you tell us about the first call you had that you would consider a hot call?
Yeah, I was. The question you sent it out, and I thought about it for a while. And I think initially there was a house in Berkeley that was occupied by some folks that were less than stellar, one of whom had already been in a shooting with a Berkeley officer and shot the officer. And so he was out, and they ran kind of a dope house, and they ran young girls out of there. And so if we ever get a call at that place, it was always, super cautious. There were guns in the house. So I can remember just starting out, knowing about the house and knowing about the players that were at the house. And we were looking for a runaway and you got to remember, Berkeley in '69 was a haven for runaways from all over the country. And so we were looking for some young girl from somewhere and had to go to that house and ultimately had to go in. So we knew there were people in there with guns, et cetera. So I can remember being, very apprehensive going on that call. And, from that, probably the next that would jump out at you. Anytime this was, 69 was pre-SWAT, basically. LAPD was adding SWAT at that point, LA sheriffs. But for our size department, a 200 plus officer department, that hadn't happened yet. So if you had an armed person in a structure, you went and got them. You had to do the search. So I can remember, really very, very vividly remember going into a building and having to look for somebody, and you're in a hallway and there's doors on both sides of the hall and you're clearing it, one door at a time. And then you're down to the last door. So, the bad guys run out of space. You've run out of space. So can there be a confrontation? Those are the ones that, that resonate that I look back on and think, yeah, your heart's in your throat on those calls.
Yeah, absolutely. Police work is so funny like that. There's so many things that you could, little tasks you get given by supervisors or just your, running radar because there's been a lot of citizens complaints in an area, or it can feel very routine. And then when you get calls like that, it kind of, you're like, oh yeah, we're the ones that deal with this stuff too.
Well, and even in the midst of that, there's always that gallows humor that, permeates law enforcement, where somebody finds something that it does break the tension, shall we say. But in this particular case, I remember the officer I was working with, we were very good friends. We started the academy together and stayed friends till he passed away. And in those days, Berkeley, like most departments, they issued you a handgun or you could buy your own. And in his case, we had each purchased our own. Well, I don't remember why, but when we bought the guns, I had more money in my pocket than he did. So I bought a Colt Python, which was a beautiful handgun. He bought a Colt Diamondback, which was the little cheaper version of the Python. It was made of alloy as opposed to steel. Anyway, he was envious of the gun. And I remember we were doing this very thing in a building. We had narrowed it down to a hallway. So we kind of did, rock, paper, scissors, who's going to go first. So I lost. I was first up. So on 3, I'm going to go to the first door and he's going to cover me. So, 1, 2, and I get this tug on my gun belt and I stop and I turn around and I said, what's wrong? He said, well, if he gets you, can I have the Python? So
that's awesome.
That was kind of the gallows humor of looking for an armed suspect.
That's I can't blame him. That's a beautiful gun.
Yeah, it is. It's still sitting in a safe and appreciating. It's like a piece of art.
Yeah, I actually just held one last week. I was at burning some time. I was getting my car worked on, and there was a gun shop nearby. So I walked in, and they had a Colt Python. I'm like, because my dad gave me when he was younger, when I was a little kid, he bought a 357 Magnum that was a Ruger Red Hawk, which is a very cool, much chunkier. It's a big. It's almost, it's kind of a chunky gun. But he told me, like, when I first shot it, when I got old enough, he said, this is a nice gun. But he said, I always wanted that Python. That's what he said.
Well, I love the other Python. We carried 38 bullets, and you could shoot 38 or 357 in that weapon. So you could carry that weapon on duty, but you had to carry the issued ammunition. But it made you, frankly, a much better shooter because the frame on that weapon is so heavy that with the lighter ammunition, the 38 caliber bullets, the gun barely jumped. You could hold on target and shoot accurately, even if you weren't a great shot.
Yeah, absolutely. I love shooting 38s out of 357 just for that exact reason. It's a real hole puncher.
Well, we had that in New Mexico too. When our department I worked on, in New Mexico, standards are much different than California. And the standard there was you could carry any weapon that you could qualify with, basically. So we had guys literally that carried 6-shot Colt 45s, not semi-automatics, revolvers, 6-inch barrel, looked like something out of Gunsmoke. And we had other guys that carried, because of Dirty Harry, they wanted a 44 Magnum.
Yeah.
Well, you go to the range, and what they were doing, they were carrying the weapon, and they had it loaded with 44 mag loads. At the range, they shot 44 caliber loads, which is like shooting the 38. So the gun with that huge frame on it never moved. You could shoot, but when you put the 44 mags in it, it was like firing a cannon. So when I got there, I changed it. I said, you have to be able, you can carry anything you want, but you have to qualify with the rounds you're carrying. Well, the 44s were gone because nobody could qualify with that thing. And if you tried to shoot at night, you were blind after the first shot.
Oh, big fireball.
Yeah. You couldn't see anything. And if you were standing next to the person, you were answering phones that weren't ringing for 3 weeks. Those ones, they were gone.
Yeah, that's a hell of a round. Another dad story. My dad had a 44 Magnum rifle, and he loved it. He thought that was great, but he always felt like the 44 Magnum was more of a rifle round. It was so big,
San Francisco PD at one point went to 41 Magnums. And believe it or not, in San Francisco, I was like cannon too. But they carried 41 caliber rounds. They didn't carry the mag rounds. So it was a big gun, but they carried a big, slow-moving round, which in a city that's congested, that big, slow-moving round is actually not a bad idea because it doesn't overpenetrate.
Right.
The scary thing is when somebody's out there with a 223, AR-15 or something, nobody thinks about the fact that bullets go at 3,000 feet per second, and it's not going to stop when it hits one thing. It's going to keep on moving. And if you miss the target, it's going to hit somebody half a mile down the road.
Yeah. That's why I never understood U.S. Air Marshals carry 357 SIGs. I never you're in an airplane. You figured you want something with a little less penetration.
I wonder, and I don't know, they used to make a hijacker round that was a subsonic that
Oh.
really wouldn't overpenetrate. They may be carrying a nose on a plane. Although I talked to a pilot about that because when I had to transport a prisoner or something, you were armed when you were transporting and you were on the plane and you'd have to tell the pilot where you're seated and all of those sort of things. And I told the pilot, I said I had bought specifically for that transport the hijacker round so it wouldn't penetrate the plane. And the pilot said, I don't care. You can shoot all the holes you want in my plane. Just don't hit a hydraulic line. He said, I can fly the plane with holes in it. So I don't know how serious a problem that is.
Oh, there you go. That's funny. ProForce Law Enforcement, the best damn cop shop in the nation, whether you're purchasing for an entire agency or you're an individual officer looking to buy firearms or duty gear, these guys are the best in the biz. ProForce has law enforcement exclusive pricing and is the place to be buying your guns and duty gear. They carry all the top industry brands, and the guys and gals that work there understand exactly what law enforcement officers need. Special discount link, tps.proforceonline.com. It's deeply discounted items just for the listeners of this show, or you can go to proforceonline.com and shop the whole place. Place is unbelievable. You can also visit Prescott, Arizona in person or Brea, California in person to get hands-on with the gear. All the contact stuff is in the show notes. Thank you, ProForce. Brian, can you describe the strangest or most bizarre thing you dealt with?
You give that actually, three things came to mind. One of them is, and I'll mention it first. It's strange and it's sad and it's weird. And going back to Berkeley, I'm working in the South Campus area, south of Cal, and we get a call. A couple at their residence says that there's a young woman there who claims she may have been a victim of sexual assault. So I'm dispatched. I get there. And I talked to this couple, and they said, she came to our front door. She knocked on the door. She was very distraught, and she said she'd been raped. And I said, okay. They said we have her sitting in the living room. And I said, okay. Because before you go in there, we need to tell you. She came in. We took her in. We put her in the room, and then she proceeded to take all her clothes off, and she's sitting there naked. I said, okay.
Weird.
So I go to the room, and sure enough, there's this young woman. She's a Cal student. She's nude, very pleasant, very matter of fact. Explains to me that she had been a victim of sexual assault maybe 6 months prior, and the case was being investigated by the University of California police. They had arrested a suspect. She was going through some counseling, and she just hit a spot in the road that derailed her. And so we talked for a moment or two, and I asked her, I said, how would you feel if we took you up to the crisis center and you could sit down and talk to a doctor? And she said, I would really like that. I said, great. I got a backup so we could, take her. I said, why don't you get dressed and we'll go. She said, okay. So I waited, and a few minutes go by, and she looks at me and she says, well, I'm not going to get dressed with you watching.
What?
So she's sitting there having this conversation. So, and it's just part of her mentality was you don't get dressed with somebody watching.
Yeah.
But there had been this disconnect. And that was sad. I mean, this incident had so derailed her that she got to this point. Fortunately, in her case, she knocked on somebody's door who was kind and caring and took her in, and we were able to get her help. But that one's kind of resonated. And the other
strange
that jumped out at me, and it has a certain humorous aspect. Graveyard shift comes on duty. I was working the 4 to 12, so we're getting off. And the graveyard sergeant asked for two of us that were working the PM shift to hold over. So we get to this house, and it was in Berkeley as well, and it was an old housing project. And the supervisor said, "We have a guy in here who's having a mental health crisis, and we're going to have to take him into custody, but he's big and strong and really acting out. And he's broken windows out in the place and throwing furniture out in the front lawn." So my partner and I said, "What do you want us to do? We're going home." Uh, he said, "Well, most of these officers on Graveyard are brand new. They've never really dealt with something like this. Like, would you guys stay in?" I said, "Sure." So the bad guy comes to the front door, and sure enough, I'm 6'3" and weigh 235 pounds. This guy's bigger than I am. And so right off the bat, it's like, oh, this is not going to be fun unless we can really talk to this guy. So I talked to him and I said, "We can help you." And we go back and forth. And I mentioned going to see the psychiatrist. Well, that does it. He doesn't want to see the psychiatrist. He backs away, runs back in. We follow him. And the house well, you were East Coast guy, had a radiator that was attached to the wall and the floor, which he went over and ripped out and threw it through the window. Now, right off the bat, you're going, this is not going to be fun. And this guy is immensely strong, but in doing so, he slices his arm on the glass on the window. So, I think, well, here's an opportunity. I tell the guy, you're hurt. Let me help you. Have somebody bring me a first aid kit. We put a compression bandage on his arm, which was badly cut. And then I wrapped him up like a mummy. I mean, I put gauze around his arms, his torso. I mean, this guy I couldn't have handcuffed him any tighter. I used all the gauze in the first aid kit. And then convinced him he needed to go to the hospital because he was bleeding. We get to the hospital. I tell the doctor, this is what we need to do, but he's having a mental health issue. So they bring the psychiatrist over. And I asked this guy, I said, "Are you MD psychiatrist or are you PhD psychologist?" He said, "No, I'm a doctor." I said, "Great. So you can look at his wound and tell him he needs sutures. At the same time, you can evaluate him psychologically because he doesn't like psychiatrists. Don't say psychiatrist.
Good idea.
Because I can tell you what happens when he does. Trust me." And this guy says, no, I could never do that. I must be honest with him. I said, "This is not a good time to be honest. This is a good time to tell him just you're a doctor." Well, sure enough, this doctor takes the bandage off, looks at the wound, and says, "Now, I'm a psychiatrist," at which time our hero rears back and punches him right in the face and just lays him out.
Oh,
He bolts out of the ER. I chase him down in front of the hospital. And at this point, I'm literally on his back. And I've got my arm around him in a carotid, and I'm trying to stop him. It carried me for about a quarter of a block before he finally, succumbed. We got him back in the hospital, and he got sutured up and taken up to the psych ward. And at the same time, on the other side of the ER, they were fixing the psychiatrist's broken nose.
hey,
Which
you warned him.
I thought there was a certain humor in that. A little comeuppance for his arrogance. He didn't want to listen. We tried to tell him, because he was saying, "Well, you're not a doctor. You're not qualified to make that decision." I said, "No, I'm not, but I wrestled with him down at the house. I can tell you, I said the magic word, psychiatrist, and I saw what happened. So, don't do that."
Yeah, I've never gotten a warm or fuzzy feeling from any ER doctor I've dealt with in a police capacity.
I think it's funny how ER has changed. When I started, ER wasn't a specialty. The doctors that worked ER were paid overtime, and they could be any doctor, basically, could work the ER shift and on a weekend, let's say. Well, we had doctors who were at the Letterman Hospital in the Presidio in San Francisco, the Army base, who were Army doctors who, they made a decent salary as an Army doctor, but they could come over and work a 24-hour shift at the ER in a city hospital and make as much money as they would probably in 2 weeks at the regular salary.
Right.
So we had a lot of Army doctors that worked on the weekends. And then finally ER became a specialty, and that changed everything. We had the ER doctors who specialized. They were good. I mean, they were really good. And they were unflappable. I mean, you could bring in people in pieces practically, and these guys didn't bat an eye. They were ready to deal with it. And then we had a nurse. I remember male nurse, great guy, Vietnam vet, and he had been through the Army's medic program. It's like a 52-week course, and these guys are in the field. They can do everything but neurosurgery. They're amazing. And between he and the really well-certified ER doctors, we were so lucky. These people, they were the creme de la creme. Nothing bothered them. And uh, if you got taken in there in an emergency, sitting they were there, you were the chances of you making it were really great.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had those good experiences. I mean, it sounds like an Army doctor would be great, or the people you're talking about. But I had an officer in the ER with OUI that drove into somebody's house, and the officer calls me and says, "Hey, I'm trying to get the guy will give blood. He agreed, consented, but the doctor said she thinks he's too intoxicated to make that decision." And I go, "Well, you better put the doctor on the phone with me, because that's the whole point. There's implied consent. It doesn't matter what condition they're in from alcohol. You agreed not to be drunk when you're driving if you hold a Massachusetts license."
And in California, when you sign for your driver's license, it says right there when you sign up that you agree you're giving your consent at that point. And
Right.
you're sober when you do that. So no, yeah.
And the guy wanted to do it. Like, and so in Mass, if you do it and you fail, you lose your license for 30 days and you go in front of the judge, all that. If the hospital forced him to be a refusal, it's 180 days right off the bat. So I'm finally, she relented, but then gave me all the, well, our lab doesn't know what kind of tube to put it in, because they said it could contain. I said, listen, you just can't use alcohol wipes, and it's got to be, now we have the tubes, we have little kits we carry, but then we didn't. I was like, I think it was like a purple stopper on it that one won't contaminate the sample. But she knew all that. She was just busting my balls.
Well, yeah, she was torn between being a doctor and a lawyer.
Right.
So, but yeah, the Army ones were great. And again, for us, they had seen, they were Vietnam vets. They had seen horrible things, and they were able to. You never want to say matter of fact when someone's seriously injured, but that's really what they were. They didn't get rattled. Where I've seen doctors who are not ER types on gunshots that look as rattled as some of the other people in the ER. That's not a good sign. You don't want the guy that's plugging the holes to look rattled.
Yeah, there's a huge difference. Like I have known personally people who are nurse practitioners or doctors but don't work in emergency medicine, and they're not good in emergency situations because they're in a controlled environment. They probably knew that about themselves, and they didn't sign up to be an ER doctor because they want a controlled environment where they can have patients and see them in the office,
And the ER specialists are adrenaline freaks. Bring me the worst. Bring me, car accidents. Bring me shooting. I mean, they just seem to thrive on that kind of pressure. And thank God they do, because if it were not for that, people would be dying in the ER. And as a consequence, they don't.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
paramedics, I'm a huge fan of paramedics. After watching them work and working with them, I'm pretty much convinced if they can get to you in the first few minutes, you got a really good chance of making it. I mean, barring a bullet to the head or something like that they could do it. But if there's the bleeding they can stop, or if they can do the initial first aid, or far better than first aid, yeah, you got a pretty good chance of surviving.
Yeah, absolutely. Paramedics are amazing. And all the places in most of the cities and towns in Mass want you to be, they'll hire you as EMT, but they want you to be a paramedic. But I noticed a lot of the city and towns around where I am is there's either no stipend, like no raise, or it's $1,000 for the year. I'm like, this person has to go through 1,000 hours of class in training, donating a lot of their time, and you were going to give them $1,000 extra. It's like, you got to pay these guys.
Yeah, and when I was in Nevada, we had a fire district as opposed to a fire department. So in California, the districts are funded via property tax, as most county type agencies, and districts are special. So they get an allocation. Voters have to vote it in, and so many cents on the dollar goes to the fire district. And Nevada had a great fire department. And the nice part was we as PD didn't have to compete with them on the city budget for tax dollars. They were being funded by a totally separate source. and they were among the better paid fighters in the county, probably the best. But they also had a requirement. They wouldn't hire you as a firefighter unless you had a paramedic license. So every firefighter they hired was a paramedic as well. So
Nice.
not only did you get the ambulance showing up with 2 paramedics on it, the engine company that showed up had 3 paramedics on it. So we had absolute Cadillac fire protection and medical service.
That's awesome. Absolutely. Brian, can you tell us about the most intense or terrifying call you dealt with as a police officer?
I think probably officer-involved shootings where you have an officer shot. Um, I was involved in Berkeley. We didn't have. It's really interesting. Oakland is next door to us, and we literally have streets that run east-west, and on the south side of that east-west street is Oakland. On the north side of the street is Berkeley. So the center line is in the middle of the street. So if you have a traffic accident, it's always exciting. It's whoever gets there first, makes the jurisdiction somebody else's. But that started in Oakland. And so Oakland's bigger. We're 140,000. Oakland's 480,000. Oakland they've lost, I think, 55 officers in the line of duty. They're a little older department than us, but not much. We've lost 2 in Berkeley, and they both happened while I was there. I was involved in one, and the other was my shift, but I was at home that night. And then another officer, he was shot. I was working the night he got shot. And those are probably the most frightening. And it's a combination of things. Your friend, your comrade, your beat buddy, whatever you want to call it, is down and being worked on and being carted off, and you're hunting for and the stakes have gone up. A lot of times you're looking for somebody who may be armed, but they've not taken on the police. They may have shot at their significant other, they may have shot at a drugstore owner or something, but they haven't quite crossed that line to take on the police. This person already has, so they may have nothing to lose at that point. So that's kind of heart stopping when you're searching for them, knowing that the chances are you better see them first. If they see you first, they're probably going to pull the trigger. So those 2, and in one, like I said, the officer was killed, and we lost a hostage, and it went on for hours, and it was a bad situation.
That's the one you
and
were
it
on
did-
the shift for?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
can you
it
take
didn't
us
seem
through
like.
that a little bit?
Sure. We had a situation on the graveyard shift. We had a sergeant that was recently promoted, and he was a senior officer. He was he'd been a patrol officer, a detective, a juvenile officer, and he was probably drawing toward the end of his career. I think he was pretty close to 50, I believe, and he promoted. And I think the main reason was for pension purposes. That it was much better to pension out as a sergeant. Your salary's higher, and that's what your pension's going to be based on. And he was old school. He'd come up through the ranks, and great guy. But when he was working the street the last time, we weren't carrying portable radios. You used a call box, believe it or not, to call the station. Well, he had his portable radio, but he had it sitting on the front seat of the car. It wasn't on his gun belt. Prowler call, pretty typical middle of the night. Neighbors see somebody. We get there, police get there, and the suspect is gone. Well, this old sergeant, he's a pretty sharp guy. He backs his car down a carport between an apartment building, and turns the lights out, and all the police cars drive away, and he waits. Well, sure enough, the bad guy pops back out where he's been hiding under a house. He confronts him, and there's a fight, and the suspect gets a hold of his gun. A neighbor comes out. The suspect is over the officer, and the neighbor hits the suspect with actually an axe that he brought with him, but he had it turned, so it was the blunt end, not the blade, that hit the guy. The guy shot the neighbor, non-fatal, and then he executed the officer.
Ooh.
And went into a house and took a couple and a 4-year-old hostage. And we got there, when obviously at that point, and I didn't get there till shift change at 8 o'clock. I came at 8 o'clock and was part of the team that was on the perimeter, dealing with maintaining the control of the situation. And we negotiated. The suspect didn't want to give up. They took a mattress and put it in a closet in the bedroom where he was holding the couple and the 4-year-old. And the 4-year-old was basically sleeping on the mattress in the closet. He wanted his wife to bring a handcuff key to the house because the sergeant who'd been shot managed to get one cuff on the guy, and he couldn't get the cuff off. So the wife came, and we weren't going to do it initially because hostage negotiation at that time, the theory was you never give that person the chance to take another hostage. At that stage, though, the theory was that he'd already taken two, and the wife wanted to do it. So she brought the key up. He took the key, and then he told her he was going to shoot her.
Oh.
So she ran away. At which point he uncuffed the key. He took the key, uncuffed the handcuffs, went back into the bedroom, and for reasons we will never know, walked over to the closet and executed the 4-year-old.
Oh my gosh.
So at that point, the husband and wife ran out of the house, and he was pursuing them and came out onto the front porch of the house and raised the weapon to shoot them, and we shot him. So it was kind of a nightmare. We lost the hostage. We lost an officer. We had a witness shot. It was locked. I mean, well, any officer while shooting a hostage situation, blocks locked down, mutual aid, because you had to. Highway Patrol had all the intersections blocked for us. Oakland police were there with us, side by side, to deal with this. And you just don't have enough people. Those things just you have to evacuate. You're on a block. You've been there. You got a house that's the problem house. You got to evacuate everything across the street because of a possible gunshot. You got to evacuate everybody either side of it. You got to evacuate the block behind the house so you don't have a bullet going. So, the number of people you need just to do that. Then you got to have a place to put everybody. You can imagine. You've been there. It is a nightmare.
That is why? And there was no. Obviously you guys killed the guy, so you couldn't find out. But
no,
shot the sleeping 4-year-old.
Yeah, there's no rhyme or reason. Nobody knows. I mean, the people in the room, the couple, they were just obviously, and then, like I said, it wasn't like not making excuses, but you have a situation where it's a kid that's crying or screaming or acting out, doesn't justify shooting or anything, but at the same time, maybe that tripped something in this person mentally. But the kid was asleep, hadn't done anything, just laying on the floor in the closet. So I have no idea what happened in his head that made him do that, or why, for any reason, he saw a 4-year-old as a potential threat. Just beyond the pale.
Yeah, that is crazy, Brian. Wow. Well, after that story, I even hesitate to ask you, do you have any positive or heartwarming stories from your career?
anything nice happened in those 35 years? I like this one. And there's lots of good stories. There are lots of people doing good things. That's one nice thing about being a cop. I mean, you see people at their absolute worst, their most embarrassed, those kinds of things. And you also see them do really good things. You see them do, and sometimes it's the cops that do a good thing. We had a situation where a kid, probably, I don't want to say 12, 13 years old, he finds a mini bike in a creek. So he takes the thing, gets it out of the creek, takes it home, tells his dad that he found it. Dad says, well, you need to call the police. It probably belongs to somebody. Kid does that. We take the bike and put it in the property room, get the numbers, and try and find an owner. And the kid calls and says, hey, if nobody claims the bike, what happens? I said, nobody claims the bike you found, it could go to you. If you wanted it. Oh, I want it. Okay. Now, how long does it take? It takes 90 days. We have to wait, and we have to put an ad in the paper. We have to do all these things. He said, okay. So he would check with us every week. Well, it's like the 89th day, and somebody claims the bike. They've been out of town, and And this kid is just devastated. I mean, he had been so uh, good about checking on it. So at the time, I was a ranking officer, and I went to our police association. I said, "Hey, look, this kid is squared away. He's really done the right thing. We have a chance here to do something, really nice." So we went to the local Kawasaki dealer and said, "Hey, have you got a really nice mini bike that's not overly expensive?" And he says, "Hey, I got one I took in on trade that is pristine." And he says, "You guys can have it for," and he gave us a price, which was great. So we bought it and we took it up and gave it to the kid.
That's
And I
awesome.
mean, it was, he was so thrilled. And, hopefully he made a friend here, but it was the right thing to do. This kid had been, honest. He
Yeah.
followed all the rules. And it got the carpet pulled out from under him at the 11th hour. And, so he got a much nicer bike, believe me, than the one he found. And the father was elated, and it was a good life lesson all the way around. It was good for our guys too, because they did the right thing, and they got to see immediate gratification for doing the right thing. Just look at that kid's face.
Yeah.
That was all you needed. So I think to me, that was a really good story. And uh, oftentimes those stories never make page one. Uh, and sometimes it's our fault. And when I was the police chief, I made that comment to a reporter, and we had a conversation, and I said, "You guys do a really good job of covering us when we screw up, but there's some good stuff out there that goes by the wayside." And she was terrific. She said, "Yeah, it's easy for us, even in like a riot, a demonstration, whatever. We film you guys because you're predictable. We know what you're going to do. We know that if the crowd throws rocks and bottles, you're going to probably throw tear gas. We know that if the crowd pushes forward, you're going to push back. So we don't know when the crowd's going to move. We don't know what they're going to do, but we know exactly what you're going to do. We've done this before." And I thought about that. So, okay, that's a good point. That makes sense. So she said, "Here's the problem. You never tell us when you do something good.
Yeah.
Like this story you just told me of the motorcyclist. We'd cover that in a minute. That's a great story. But unless someone picks up the phone and drops a dime on us, we don't know what's happening."
Right.
So she said, "Call us. We'll come cover the story." She goes, "It may not make the 6 o'clock news, but trust me, turn on the news on Sunday night. It'll be on. Sunday's slow news day. We need news stories." And that's a great story. And we get people, family type people on Sunday evening watching the news. We'll run that story at 6 o'clock on Sunday night. So I made it a point at that point, or use our PIO. If we have something good, we call the press, and we got some good press out of it. And
Yeah.
it was usually on Sunday night, on a
Yeah.
slow news night. So uh, sometimes we're our own worst enemy. We don't tell the press when we do something right.
Yeah. I do see a lot of PDs being better about that, having like a lieutenant or somebody assigned to like getting their attention when something positive is going on,
Yeah, it's our own fault if we don't toot our own horn when we do something well.
Right. Yeah, I love that story, man. Because man, who can't remember being a teenager or a kid and just absolutely obsessing over something you want? You're drawing pictures of it. You're looking at pictures of it. You're thinking about all the stuff you'll do with it, and then boom, you're not getting it.
He was that close, one day away. I mean, I felt so sorry for him when the thing got claimed and we had to tell him it got claimed.
Yeah,
He was just crushed.
I love that story, man. That's a great one. Really popular question with the audience. There's a lot of people who listen to the show that are thinking about being cops or doing ride-alongs. They're in backgrounds, and they really love to hear the men and women that come on the show give them some advice for becoming a police officer.
I think, in part of it, we're doing backgrounds now. I'm intimately involved in doing this. Um, some of it comes down to use your head. I mean, think about the consequences of decisions that, uh, it's not just the here and now that it's kind of like, and I don't know what I'm going to date myself here. I'm kind of a dinosaur on some of this, but, social media, sexting.
Yeah.
Somebody said, we have a number of applicants that will come in and say, "Yes, I've exchanged nude pictures of myself with my girlfriend or whatever, my significant other." And I asked the obvious question, are you still with that person? Well, no, we broke up. And I said, and where do you think those photos are? Oh, they would never post those. Oh, yes, they would. Uh,
Mm,
if you have a falling out with that person and there's some anger, I said, internet comments, emails, photos, they have the shelf life of plutonium. They don't die. They're out there forever and a day. So before you send that photo, before you write that stupid email, before you make that social media comment, think about who's going to read that. And could you defend that comment on the front page of the paper tomorrow morning? Probably not. Don't make it.
right.
Don't put something out there that can haunt you. And then my pet peeve, if you get hired and if you're fortunate enough to be a police officer and you're driving around in your patrol car, roll down the damn window. I am so tired of looking at cops driving around with their window rolled up in their little black and white cocoon with the air conditioning on, and they wouldn't hear somebody screaming for help if they were just 5 feet outside the car.
Yeah.
Uh, and when I started, supervisor saw you driving around with your window up, you've got days off. I don't care if it was raining. I remember my old sergeant said, that's why I gave you a raincoat. You had to be able to listen to what's going on outside. Uh, and if somebody wanted to get your attention, I mean, they could be standing on the sidewalk screaming at the top of their lungs. You're not going to hear them if you got the air conditioning on.
Yeah.
So that's that. I see that all the time now and that just irks me. That's my pet peeve. But the background part to think about, just and finance, you know, don't default on your bills. Don't have your car repossessed. Don't have,
Right.
you know, you have 23 accounts on your FICO score, and 18 of them have delinquents. You know, that get your bills paid. Don't send stupid emails.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, and if you're going to leave a job, tell your employer you're going to leave. Don't just quit jobs with no notice. And we got
Yeah.
a bunch of them like that. Dude. So, you'll do a background and say, yeah, the person worked for us for so long, but they just didn't show up one day.
Yeah.
And you ask the
Yeah.
candidates, no, I didn't like the job. I didn't like it, so I just quit. Well, there's a protocol to quitting. And you have to hit the protocol. But so they're little things, but they're things that disqualify people quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good stuff. That funny you say that about the radio. My dad used to tell me back, and he's been retired 15 years now, but he said he remembers back when he started, there was a local chief that wouldn't order the patrol cars with radios because you could still have them not have radios because he wanted them to have the windows down and be listening, and they wouldn't if they had the radio.
That's I've been there. We had the same problem. Our department used to pay the fee to have the radios taken out of the cars before they were delivered. So it cost us more to get the car without because the car came with a radio. So
Yeah.
you had to pay somebody to pull it out. And we finally said, no, just leave them alone. And if someone's driving around with the radio on and this is a radio call, that's a sergeant's issue. Let the sergeant deal with that.
Right.
And
Right.
we also found out over the years that sometimes there was more information on a news channel during a critical incident than there was on the police channel.
Yeah.
So sometimes being tuned into what was going on was beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Brian, Golden Gate Tales. Tell us about it, brother.
This is my new endeavor. I started writing about 5 or 6 years ago. And what I did, I took my time and police work, my time with Universal Studios and with the museum, and collected some stories with people I worked with, people I've met, and decided to write a crime fiction series. And where better than San Francisco to write it? I grew up there. It's my home. I know the city, and I know SFPD pretty well. Even though I didn't work there, I had lots of great connections there. And when I worked homicide over in the East Bay, I called San Francisco and talked to some friends in homicide and asked them if I could come over to the city on my days off and just be a fly on the wall with them because they were handling probably 100 homicides a year at that time. And so they let me. And so I would spend my days off with them. I got to go to crime scenes, sit in on interviews, do it all. And so they become the protagonists in the book. They're the homicide inspectors from San Francisco. So the stories are crimes that are real, but they're composites of real crimes to make one crime. And the characters are real people, but they're composites of real people. Some not so much a composite. Some are pretty thinly veiled. You can kind of tell who it is if you know me and you know some of the players. And then, of course, the other advantage when you're an author, you have this disclaimer at the start of the book that says, any semblance to real people is purely coincidental, etc., which allows you carte blanche to take a swipe at somebody you don't like and make them a bad person in the book. So you can have some literary license with that. The transition is from police writing, which is cryptic and concise, and you got to get all the information in a relatively short. I use the term the Jack Webb old dragnet, just the facts, ma'am, and
Right.
where you go to a novel and you want to expand on that. You want to make it interesting for people to read it. It's boring if you're reading with the way we write as police officers, so you have to make that transition to writing more descriptively, which hopefully keeps the reader's attention. So Greed is the new book. It just came out. It's the third one in the series. Same characters basically throughout, although each book can stand alone. If you read them in sequence, the character development is better. But that also sells more books, which makes me happy.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I got involved in that. And I've had a lot of fun doing it. And it is discipline. It does get you up in the morning to write and to do those kind of things. And it allows you to, you think back, like we just talked about things that happened in the career. It gives you an opportunity to put that in writing, which is sometimes kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds awesome. Brother. GoldenGateTales.com is a place they can order the book there, and also
Sure.
on
It's
Amazon.
connected to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and hopefully some local bookstores I've been working with that are going to carry the material. The Copperfields, which is it's not small anymore. God, they must have about 8 or 9 bookstores, but they're local in Marin and Sonoma counties, and kind of a throwback to the old independent bookstores where you walk in, they got the hardwood floors, the old wooden
Yeah,
floors,
I like
and there's something about a bookstore. I just really enjoy a bookstore.
Hell yeah. Well, Brian, the link to get your books will be in the show notes. It was an honor to have you on the show, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate you having me. It's always fun to talk about what was going on and when.
Yeah, absolutely. And we said before we came on, I got some other podcasts you need to go on. Even better suit Cops and Writers with Patrick O'Donnell. Great guy, and it's all about cops that write novels and books. So
I'd love to do that. That'd be fun. It's always nice to talk.
Hell yeah.
Go talk about yourselves even better.
That's right. All right, brother. I'm going to put you in the I got to do the outro to the show. Can you hang on just for like 2 minutes? We can chat after.
Sure.
All
Absolutely.
Right. The great Brian Brady, everybody, not my childhood friend Brian Brady, but the author and retired police officer. Great stories. Honor to have him on. Thank you to him for making the appearance. This is a time in the show where I thank the Patreon sponsors. Sergeant and above get a shout out. I'm going to do my best here with my waning voice to get this done. First, the lieutenants. Who I'm talking about is Andy Biggs. The great and powerful Andy Biggs, Kyle Roberts, Mike Roach, Roach Machines, AI Solutions. Check him out. The great and powerful Thomas Connell, everybody. Sergeant level, Adam Alexander. Thank you, Adam McMahon. Adam Mihal, my man. The great Ben Peters. Brad Thompson, Brett Lee, everybody. Dan Carlson from Burley Boards. Check him out on Instagram. Amazing woodworker. Sherry Finch, thank you. Madame Clark Lakoff, you are wonderful. David Ellman, Dennis Carrasquillo, my man. Doug and Kelly Newman, love you guys, and I'll see you soon, visiting from Wyoming. Dylan Mosher, thank you, Dylan. Elliot Sykes, ladies and gentlemen. Gabriel Decknop, thank you. The great Gary Steiner. George Cariotis, none other than the great George Cariotis. Thank you, George. Jorge, Greg Gadboy. Thank you. Jackson Dalton from Black Box Safety. Check them out. James Rose, everybody. Jason Lorbree. Oh, thank you. Jason Lau. Jessica King. John Jordan. John Shoemaker. John and Aaron Kate. Love you guys. See you at church. Lauren Stimson, the handsome Lane Campbell. Lisa Gano. Marcus Johansson, ladies and gentlemen. Can't believe it. Iceman from Motor Cop Chronicles. Check out his podcast. Thank you, Iceman. Nancy, Ham and Paul, Maloney, Raymond Arsenault, everybody. Richard Tolles. Keep on trucking, brother. Stay safe out there. Sasha McNabb, the great Sasha McNabb. Sam Conway, ladies and gentlemen. Scott Young. Sean Clifford. Seth Wright, everybody. Thank you, Seth. Sheriff Ronald Long. Oh, thank you. Tammy Walsh, holding it down at dispatch. Thank you, Tammy. Tony Fahey, my man. Zachary Pleat, everybody. And the great George Tessier. Love you, buddy. See you at church. Guys, those are the Patreon members, Sergeant and above. I love saying your name. I love the support. I appreciate the link is in the show notes. If you truly love the show and you want to show me monetarily, you can do it there. But rest assured, the show will remain free so that everybody can hear these stories from the great men and women of law enforcement. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.